There's a blanket in your house right now that you can't see. You've never washed it, never folded it, never put it away. You've been sleeping under it since the day you swiped a card you couldn't pay off, and it has been getting heavier every single night since. You call it debt. Your bank calls it a balance. But your brain, the ancient, stubborn, 5-year-old part of your brain, calls it something else entirely. It calls it safety. Here's the part nobody tells you. In the 1950s, a pediatrician named Donald Winnicott noticed something strange in children. Long before they could talk, babies would grab a piece of cloth, a blanket, a stuffed rabbit, a torn corner of fabric, and hold onto it like it was the only solid thing in an unstable world. He called it a transitional object. It wasn't the mother. It wasn't the child. It was the bridge between the two, something to hold onto while the real world felt too big, too uncertain, too cold. Children grow up. Most of them put the blanket down. But some of us, quietly, secretly, just find a new one. And for a terrifying number of adults living paycheck to paycheck, that new blanket has a 24.99% interest rate. Think about the first time you swiped that card for something you couldn't afford. Your hands didn't shake. Your chest didn't tighten. Something in you actually relaxed. That's not an accident. That's the exact same neurological relief a toddler feels clutching a stuffed animal in a thunderstorm. The threat outside, the empty bank account, the rent due Friday, disappears for a second. The card becomes the blanket, and the blanket becomes the lie. Now here's where it gets dangerous. A blanket protects you from cold. It does nothing against heat. And high-interest debt is heat. Invisible, silent, compounding heat. Eating through the fabric one thread at a time while you sleep soundly underneath it, mistaking the weight for warmth. Every month you carry a balance. Interest doesn't add itself politely to the pile. It multiplies against itself. That's the part your brain physically cannot picture. Human beings are wired to understand addition, one thing plus another thing. We are catastrophically bad at understanding multiplication over time. A $6,000 balance at 24% doesn't grow by $6,000 a year. It grows against itself, curling back and feeding on its own weight, until one day you look down and the blanket that used to fit in your hands now covers the entire bed. Picture the actual shape of it. Month 1, the interest is barely a stain on the fabric, $20, $30, nothing you'd notice. Month 12, that stain has spread. Month 36, it isn't a stain anymore. It's the majority of the blanket. You are now paying every month mostly to keep a piece of cloth that was never warming you in the first place. And still, you don't rip it off. Why? Because economists have a name for what's happening to you, and it's not stupidity. It's called loss aversion. Your brain feels the pain of losing $400 a month toward that balance about twice as intensely as it feels the pleasure of gaining $400. So paying it down feels like bleeding. Keeping the minimum payment small feels like survival. Your brain isn't broken. It's just running 200,000-year-old software on a modern financial operating system it was never built to handle. There's a second trick hiding inside that minimum payment, and it's almost cruel in its elegance. The bank doesn't print the full balance in bold. It prints the minimum payment in bold, small, manageable, almost friendly. Your eyes land on the $85 first, not the $6,000 underneath it. Your brain anchors to the number it saw first and quietly decides the problem is smaller than it is. That's not you failing at math. That's a system engineered, deliberately, around the fact that your brain trusts the first number it sees more than the truth beneath it. So you keep paying that $85 a month and you feel something dangerously close to pride. Look at me, handling my responsibilities. Except the balance barely moves. You're not walking forward. You're running on a treadmill built at a slight incline, and the bank owns the remote. And every year, without telling you, they tilt it just a little higher. Here's the thing that makes this so hard to see from the inside. You are not lazy. You are not careless. You are most likely exhausted, and exhaustion changes how a brain makes decisions. Researchers have found that financial stress alone can temporarily strip away the equivalent of over a dozen IQ points of working memory. Not because you got dumber, but because your mind is spending most of its processing power on the threat, not the solution. That's why the blanket feels so necessary in the moment you reach for it. You're not weak. You're cognitively underwater, grabbing for the nearest thing that floats. Here's the moment everything reorganizes. The blanket was never protecting your future. It was protecting your present, a 5-second flinch of anxiety, silenced at the cost of years. Winnicott said children, eventually, don't need the object anymore because they develop something called object constancy, an internal sense that safety exists even when the object is gone. They stop needing the blanket because they finally trust that they'll be okay without it. Most adults never build that same trust with money, so they keep reaching for the same worn fabric every time life feels unstable. A plane ticket they can't afford, a dinner to prove something to nobody, a treat yourself. That's actually a toddler soothing itself in a body that pays rent and has a mortgage application to fill out next year. The card isn't the problem. The unfinished development underneath it is. And this is where the real cost reveals itself. Not the interest, not the fees, but the years. Every year you carry that balance is a year compound growth never touched your side of the ledger. It's a house down payment that stayed a rental. It's a retirement account that started 10 years later than it should have. It's a version of you, 5 years from now, either sleeping without that weight on your chest or still negotiating with the same fabric, just thinner and more frayed than it is tonight. The debt doesn't just take your money, it takes your timeline, and time is the one thing compounding needs to actually work for you instead of against you. So what actually breaks the spell? Not shame. Shame just makes people reach for the blanket harder, the same way telling a scared child, "Stop being a baby," never once made them let go of the stuffed animal faster. What breaks it is the same thing that helps a child put the blanket down, proof, small and repeated, that you can survive without it. The first month you send an extra $50 toward the balance instead of toward comfort, nothing dramatic happens. You don't feel rich. You feel slightly colder, slightly more exposed. And that discomfort is the entire point. It's the exact sensation of your nervous system learning, for the first time in years, that you don't actually need the fabric to survive the night. Every single time you choose that harder, colder feeling over the soothing swipe, you're not just moving numbers between accounts. You're building the exact internal safety Winnicott described, the belief that you, not the object, are the source of your own stability. That belief compounds too, just slower and in the opposite direction of the interest. The people who become financially evolved, the ones who stop bleeding into 20% interest forever, don't do it by getting smarter about spreadsheets. They do it by finally growing out of the blanket, by feeling the cold for a few uncomfortable months and discovering they didn't actually die. They discover something almost embarrassing in hindsight. The object was never load-bearing. They were. Somewhere tonight, someone is going to open an app, see a balance that makes their stomach drop, and reach for the card instead of facing it. And somewhere else, someone is going to feel that same drop and pay the extra $50 anyway, uncomfortable and a little unsure, but awake. Only one of those two people is going to wake up 10 years from now without the weight on their chest. The blanket is still there right now, wherever you left it. The only real question left is whether you noticed it tonight, or whether, once again, it just noticed you first.